Pastor, I love how you've always put a lot into the invitations when you're giving people an opportunity to receive the gospel. Can you talk about our philosophy as a church for casting the net wide and what that means for us?
Well, you have to start with where I was in my own personal beliefs, in my personal experience. When we started the church, I had convinced myself that I couldn't give an invitation, that I was not called to be an evangelist, and that it wasn't my gift set, and that I didn't have the ability to invite people to receive Christ. So that was one thing. And then also I thought, when you give an invitation, you create a lot of false conversions. And I'd read statistics, and I'd seen real life examples of people who raised their hand, went forward, made a commitment, signed a card, and it made no difference in their life. And my goal was to do everything I could to make sure that didn't happen. Until I read, again, this messes up a lot of my leadership paradigms when I read what Jesus actually said and did versus what I think makes sense. So I had this awesome little ministry paradigm worked out where, we make it really hard for people to respond to the gospel, and then they'll really mean it. And then I read where Jesus is like, hey, there's a farmer, he sowed some wheat and some tares grew up alongside it. So you got wheat and weeds, and they grow up side by side. And the servant said to the master, you want us to go get the tares out of there? Make sure only the wheat grows? And he says, no, that's for the Father to do at the end of the age. You just be faithful to get the wheat growing, and let me separate the wheat from the chaff. Let me separate the wheat from the tares. That's my job. And the Lord showed me that I had been trying to judge the motives of people's heart rather than just simply taking responsibility for the purity of the message. Yeah. So if you're not sowing good seed, if you're not really preaching the gospel, and then you're inviting people to respond, then that's irresponsible, and God will hold you accountable for that. So if you're like, hey, you want a better life? Raise your hand. Now that you got your hand up, that means you really want to accept Jesus. Pray with me. And then you count everybody whose hand moved during the invitation and report these big numbers. Well, we don't do that. I try to really present the gospel, or if we don't present the gospel clearly, what it means to be saved, then we direct people to the tent where we can have a conversation with them and hopefully be able to explain that to them. I'm sure we don't do that perfectly all the time, and we could probably even train that better. But our goal is that we plant the right seed, and not that we try to separate the authentic from the inauthentic based on what we can see with our eyes. And if you apply human logic to it, it would make sense to say, are you really sure? Are you really sure? And then we say, a month later, well, they must not have really meant it because this, and this. Well, if I look at your life hard enough, I bet I can find some things that will make me question whether you're really saved too. And you're like, well, no, I don't do that stuff. Yeah, but you got this gossip side of you. You say some horrible crap about people. And then yet because they still struggle with drinking, they didn't really get saved. So God can't have time to work on their thing like he has time to work on you. He's patient with you. He's still working on you, but he was supposed to finish them when they raised their hand. He was supposed to be done. And we get real judgmental. And so what I've tried to do here is I've tried to let the wheat grow alongside the weeds and let God separate that and rejoice in people's initial response, because I think that's worth celebrating in and of itself. I don't believe that because 2,143 people raised their hand that those same 2,140, how many did I say? 3, 7, whatever, people are automatically going to be in heaven. I'm not that elementary in my thinking. I know that it's the heart and the hand is just an expression. But I still think it's worth celebrating that over 2,000 people just raised their hand and indicated that they want to begin a relationship with Christ. Now as a church, what do? We point the way, clear the path. We're there for them. We can't make them born again. But if they are born again, then we can provide a place where they can grow in their faith. And I have to close my eyes and lay down my head at night, making sure that I'm faithful to plant good seed, faithful to clear the path, faithful to till the ground where appropriate, and that I'm able to know at the end of the day that God asked me to bring him a harvest. He said there would be weeds right alongside the wheat and that I couldn't tell the difference, and it wasn't my job to. He told me to bring him the whole harvest and he'd separate it out on the threshing floor. So that's what I do when I give an invitation. I'm like, You want wheat, God? Here's some wheat. I know there's a lot of weeds. I was going to take it out for you, but you told me that was above my pay grade. So here's all of it. You do the specialty work now. And that doesn't mean I'm careless or reckless. I try to put a lot of intention into how I explain it. There will always be people who think that the way we do it is compromising the gospel. It's easy believism. And I had a couple sit down with me one time that was a good couple, and they really lit into me. And I stood up to them because they're good people. They love the church. But they said, what are we doing with all these people that get saved? We got to do something with them. We got to do something with them. And I'm like, well, what do you want to do with them? What are we going to do that we're not already doing? Here's all the opportunities they have to grow in their faith. What else do you want to do? And we started talking about how everybody wants to be a part of a church that reaches lost people till you really start reaching lost people. Right. Then you realize that lost people are lost, crazy, wild, not always consistent. People's path isn't always a straight line. And you can't quantify it and put it in buckets and see an improved person in 7 days. And so what we have to do, again, as a church, is to make sure we're never compromising the message, make sure the path is as clear as possible, make sure that we're along the way not losing the essence of what it means to take up your cross and follow Jesus, and trying to create an easy believism. But at the same time, we got to freely offer grace. Yeah. And that's what they couldn't stand about Jesus at the end that made them kill him. He took away all their little rules and all their classes and all of their memorizations and all their catechisms that someone had to go through to really be in the club. Right. And they couldn't stand it in the end. And that's why the apostles were persecuted, because they made it too simple and they gave it away too freely. And that is why people will sometimes crucify our church, because all those people can't really be getting saved over there. I was at a shooting range with Buck last year. Only time I ever went to a shooting range. And the guy that worked there said, aren't you that preacher? And I said, I am a preacher. I probably am the preacher that you're talking about. And this doesn't seem like it's going to be a positive conversation. And he said, do you ever preach at the church, or is it always a video? I said, well, I always preach at the church, even if it is a video. It's a video of me. And he said, well, you won't find me around there. And I said, that's too bad, man. It's really awesome. And he goes, I just don't believe it. Too much, too fast. And I was like, what? He said, too much, too fast. And I was like, too many people? He said, yeah. I said, you're barking up the wrong tree now, buddy. I said, you talking about my church? He said, don't take it personal. I said, no, I take it very personal. I gave my life up to start that church. I don't know what you're talking about, but you haven't even been before. And so we kind of get into it. It ends up in the parking lot. He wants to go outside and talk in the parking lot at the shooting range. I didn't ever tell this story, I don't think. And I was like, what do you make of the book of Acts? He said, the book of what now? And he said, I don't know nothing about the book of Acts, but I know about that rock and roll music y'all do, and it ain't the Lord. And I was like, man, this guy, he is like a parody sketch of the person who wants to criticize what God is doing without even ever getting up close to it. And then he said this, my kids never wanted to go to church until your church. Now they go all the time. and I'm like, and this is bad? And you hate me for this? So it ended up it got real tense and almost got in a fight, and Buck had to step between us at the shooting range in the parking lot, because I don't take that stuff real kindly if you're criticizing what I give my life to. I probably should handle it better, but I was just flabbergasted by it. And when I got in the car afterwards and was kind of processing everything, I realized that I can either spend my whole life justifying our approach or doing ministry, but I can't do both. Because every minute I spend justifying the approach is a minute I'm not doing ministry. And so if it makes me simple, if I have to answer to Jesus for some people that raised their hand that really didn't get it when I get to heaven, but my heart was to share the gospel with as many people as possible, I can live with that. A lot easier than I can live with, you made it hard to enter the kingdom and you didn't give people the opportunity to respond. And that's where I've chosen to err. And the night that I decided that I could share the gospel, I was in bed watching Pastor Craig give an invitation. And he was calling people to raise their hand, and it was intense, and he was just nailing it. And Holly looked at me and said, "You could do that if you had the guts." And I knew in my heart she was absolutely right, that I was using it as a cop-out. And I'd been bringing in our friend Clayton King, who's an evangelist, to be my closer, because I didn't think I knew how to give an invitation. And it was as if God said, it's your church that you started, and nobody's going to know how to better harvest it than you. So when people talk about the way we give invitations, and they don't know the grueling process of how I got there, of how I thought I couldn't even do it, and how I didn't want to do it because I'd seen it done the wrong way, and I'd seen all this, and yet at the end of the day, I felt like if I don't freely offer the grace of God to people, allow them to respond, whether they're raising their hands or walking an aisle or checking a card, I believe there's a bunch of different ways to do it. But if I don't offer people the opportunity to repent of their sins, believe in Jesus Christ, and turn to Him and place their faith in Him, that I'm not really doing my job. And so I'm sold out to that. And say what you want to say. In the meantime, we will reach a lot of people. And in the parable of the sower and the soils, only 1 out of 4 fell on good ground. And it shouldn't surprise me if Jesus told that parable, that 1 out of 4 people may go on to join a group and may go on to live a holy life. That doesn't mean I sow less seed because it isn't working. That means I better sow more to make up for the one that gets choked out, eaten by a bird, or left on the wayside and scorched by the heat.